I've got the Bosworth Longsword made by Windlass Steelcrafts. I've got the Rhinelander bastard sword made by Hanway. They're both 15th century longswords of fairly similar design. Let's have a look at them both, see what the differences are and see which, if any, comes out on top. Here goes. Hello. I found that videos about swords aren't all that popular, but at the same time, people do sometimes send me messages about videos I made quite a while ago saying they found it useful to have an honest review and trying to say accurate things about the swords. And a lot of the time I find when I'm interested in a sword, if I have a look at videos online, you find there's just a video where they take it out of the box and cut some things with it, and that's all. So hopefully these will be useful to somebody. I plan to make quite a lot more of them using a card like this that records a few details. Let's have a quick talk about that. You're going to see me walking around with a clipboard a bit because I want to try to be as accurate as possible. My memory isn't all that good. So we'll have the name, the material it's made out of, the type, the weight, length, blade length, base width, the balance point, which is easy enough to establish, the base thickness and end thickness, and then number of fullers, maybe some other notes about them, the typology as far as I can tell, and then last of all we've got speed and strength, and that's something I plan to assess on a scale of 1 to 5. It's largely arbitrary, but it might give people an idea of where a weapon performs well and how it compares to others. And then there's some notes at the end as well. I did think about having what people call centre of percussion in here, and in case you don't know, it's actually something I'm familiar with because I'm a stringed instrument player, and when you use the harmonics on a string you are using a centre of percussion. I could estimate, I could look at it, I could bang the hilt, but I'm not really sure what it tells you. Apart from that, I tried to find out a bit more about it, and one of the first detailed sources I found said that it's not really a centre of percussion, that's a misunderstanding, and it's a centre of vibration, and I was going to put that on the chart. Then I thought, why discuss something that I don't really understand just because I've heard other people talking about it, and it's not something that's really going to make you, it's not going to inform you as to whether you want to buy a particular sword or not, so that's not going in there. Width is going to be this dimension and thickness this dimension. I wanted to try to find a better word for thickness, and somebody recommended a Japanese word that's used in sword descriptions. Again, past a certain point it seems as though you're being a bit pretentious, so thickness it is. Let's begin with the Rhinelander sword. I started to note that clipping these microphones onto a t-shirt doesn't work very well, but this is going to slide a lot, so I'll get something better soon. The sheath is very basic. This is the sort of thing I'm used to getting with a cold steel weapon, most weapons. I think it's leather, but you know, I'm not that certain. What I can tell you is that this resists corrosion fairly well, and I think that's partly because of a tighter sheath, but tighter scabbard, but I'll discuss that a bit more in a moment. This is high quality. These, I'm certain are leather, these most certainly are leather. I expect the sheath would be as well. This is looser in the sheath, therefore it's not going to be quite as well protected, and there's no doubt about it. If you turn this upside down, it's coming out quite easily. As mentioned already, they're both 15th century, as far as you can tell, as far as I can tell, mid 15th century. Bosworth Longsword. I think I read that it's supposed to be based on something found at the bottle of Bosworth. but I can't find that now. Perhaps I imagined it. I don't have a lot of faith in what manufacturers say about swords. There might be some more information available, but I don't think it's right to be confident that this is a good replica of a historical weapon. That said, it's very well made, and it's not like your average windlass bottom of the range sword. I think they do pay attention to detail on this, and it is of quite good quality. And I'll say the same about the Hanway Rhinelander bastard sword. I think it's well established that bastard sword, longsword, they're much the same really, and it depends on who you ask as to what they call it. Rhinelander bastard sword, what does that really tell you, except it's expected to be German in design, and I don't even know if we can be all that sure that it is, so I wouldn't attribute too much to the names given to these weapons. You do have the side ring here, and it feels well made enough. I've swung it around a bit. It's not loose, not like a very cheap weapon, but I can't help feeling if something heavy came crashing down on this, I wouldn't rely on it. I wouldn't want to. I think what you want to do is try to parry something, especially a heavier weapon, and have it slide down after you've bound with it, and have that as hand protection. You don't want to thrust up directly and have something, especially not a heavy bladed weapon, an axe or something, crash down on that, because I'm not that confident it would protect you. Now let's have a look at some of the statistics we'll record. I'm really going to have to get a table. The Bosworth Longsword is made out of 1060 steel, and you may or may not know that that means that not a lot. It means that the 10 is saying that it's carbon steel. I'm sure metallurgists will say there's a lot more detail to it than that. And the 60 is telling you that 0.6% of it is carbon. And when I first read that, I was surprised. I would have expected there to be more carbon in there. Don't know why. There's nothing, I don't have any reference really for that. Now, I have other 1060 blades that have been more resilient than this. This one has had a little bit of rust on it. I left it in the scabbard for probably no more than 3 months, and when I take a sword out, unless it's just for a minute or two, I oil it when I return it. So it's had a lot of oil on it. Maybe I should be using thicker oil, but the edges, you might just see they are, where it's sharpened, they're bare metal and not painted, and the edges had a very faint coat of rust on them. I did something foolish then. I used wire wool to clean them off, and that blunts the blade. Since then I've used a sanding block to nicely clean it, but this isn't as sharp as it came now, which is my fault. As I say, although it's 1060 steel, not particularly corrosion resistant, it's rusted a little bit more than some other weapons of 1060 steel I have. So I don't think the steel's to blame. In particular, I think this scabbard isn't as tight as you would like it to be, and that's part of the problem. Now on to the Rhinelander bastard sword. This is made out of 5160 steel, a similar amount of carbon in it, but it also has some chromium, and I think you can see when you look close at it, it looks like nice steel. It has a certain pattern to it, which I think is more due to the treatment than the type of steel, but it's shiny and it hasn't rusted. And incidentally, as far as I could tell, the Bosworth Longsword is a type 17 from the oak shot typology, and the Rhinelander bastard sword seems to be a 20B. Pretty sure it's a B. I might have to correct it later when I edit the video. Let's get rid of the scabbards, we don't need these anymore. When I was thinking about making this video, and I planned to make it a long time ago, and there have been various interruptions, I had it in my mind that the windlass Bosworth sword is much nicer to handle Then recently when I got them out, I don't know if that is the case. They both got good and bad about them. Let's have a look at the length first for the Bosworth Longsword. I'm sure I'll get better at this when I make more videos of this type, and I'll do it a little more smoothly. I really need 1.5 meter ruler to make this an easier job. Okay, total length for the Bosworth Longsword, 119 centimeters, and the blade length, right to the base we have 91, and for the Rhinelander Bosworth sword we have a total length of 114, and a blade length of 91. So the blade length, perhaps give or take a few millimeters, is identical, and it could be said that the hilt of the Bosworth Longsword is quite long. It's more than you need to handle well with two hands. And let's have a look at the base width first of the Bosworth, and we've got 43. I won't count the 0.1. So there we have 43 millimeters, and of course, why would I say of course, the Rhinelander is larger at 47. Now, of more interest to people who really want to know how a sword handles is of course the change in the width that tells you the extent of the distal taper. It certainly looks to me as though this tapers quite a bit. Let's see. We have here, I think I will count the decimal. We have 5.3, and I'm going to make this, I think, a few centimeters from the end in each case, and it goes down to 3.1, which I don't think is tremendous, but it's certainly a notable taper. I understand you generally don't have much of a taper in cold steel swords, and I've got a couple of them, and I'll look into that later on. Now, the Rhinelander, 5.3, interesting, identical. And about 3 centimeters from the end we have 2.6. I made that more like 2 centimeters, and then you've got 2.6. It's 2, let's call it 2.8 at 3 centimeters. So it may be a little more significant. It can afford to be, because you can see the end is so much thicker, or the width is greater, using my terminology. Fullers, well, we've got 1 3/4 length on the Rhinelander, and we have no fuller at all on the Bosworth sword. Let's have a look at the weight of each of them, and for that I'll have to resort to my traditional approach of badly clipping this onto a t-shirt, but it shouldn't take very long. Feel a bit of rain there. Now, I like the rain, but I don't want these swords to get any rusher than they have to. That's silly. I'm probably going to cut water bottles with them, so they'll soon get wet anyway. Okay, Rhinelander first. I did set this to stand the right way, but it hasn't done that. Okay, and we've got 1.52. 1.52 kilos. I expect the Bosworth Longsword to be lighter. I can't remember the weights on the website. I bought them some time ago now, but it certainly feels lighter. There was a rather large winged insect there. Let's take it off. Back on. And 1.22 for the Bosworth Longsword. Now, I mentioned the typology. This takes us to handling, and after that, all that's left is to cut up a few bottles, largely because it's fun, but I think it gives you some indication of how a blade handles. I've actually been looking into some other materials for cutting. I don't really want to start buying tatami mats. I've tried card, rolled card. I need a better mount for that. I've actually tried something else which I'll demonstrate soon, and I think is a pretty good idea. Unfortunately, it's not easy to cut, so it is a good indication of how sharp a blade is, but what I found is when I chopped it, half of it disappeared into the hedgerow and I've been unable to recover it. I've got more, so that's something I'll get into later on. This feels easier to handle. We see it's significantly lighter at almost exactly 300 grams. Really need to move a little bit further away. You can use it quite easily with one hand. And it's pretty fast with two hands. One of the ways I like to test things is just using this simple stick balancing. And when I use something like the heavy, I can't even remember what it's called now, but a heavy windlass blade that's I've been told is starred after, I think, sort of Boromir, something like that. I think it's complete rubbish, and I don't think Tolkien was hardly a weapons expert, but I don't think he would have had that bad an impression of what kind of a sword somebody would be using on the battlefield. I have a review of that, and I can remember it's much harder to do this with alone. So this is pretty fast to maneuver, it's easy to handle, and I think for that reason, if you were using this and you were unarmoured and you were to face somebody who's using this, then the person with the Rhinelander sword would have quite a disadvantage. Let's just do a similar thing here. This is heavier. Yeah, in fact, I think you would want to use this with two hands if you had any choice in the matter at all. And for this test, it's much slower. Well, I don't know if the frequency is all that different, but my arm is sorer. Of course, I already used the other sword with it. What a shame you can't compare them side to side without using the weaker arm. This is, of course, we expect it to be heavier, but I think it's also to do with a point of balance. And of course, that reminds me, haven't had a look at that yet, have I? Let's do that now. See, and hope this isn't much harder to do than I've anticipated. From what I've just done, I expect it to be further along the weapon with this. Wonder if that would be correct. I'm going to say it's close enough. So we're going to say along the blade, it's at 12 centimetres on the Rhinelander. Inevitably, I've lost my pen. Right, point of balance, 12 centimetres. And it feels heavier at the end, so I expect it to be further along. See if I'm right or not on the Rhinelander than on the Bosworth sword. This one's very oily, necessarily because of the risk of rust. Okay, and it is further. Let's see, that's going to be, I think that's 9.5. Maybe not as much as I expected to find. For my own opinion, if I was to fight somebody unarmoured, I'd want this. It's going to be faster. You've got the possibility, if you want to take advantage of the hilt, just a little bit more range. I don't know if that 5 centimetres or so is considered to be all that important. It's certainly, as I said, easier to handle, but if I was to be, let's conjure a fantasy scenario, and there was some heavily built orc swinging huge battle axes at me, I'd much rather parry with this than this. In particular, at the end, you've got, on the Bosworth sword, you have half as much steel. Let's see if I can show that fairly well side by side. I think that shows it fairly well. So this is going to be much stronger for parrying and binding, and it may well be more durable. Now this will be very good at penetrating. I'm sure this is going to go straight through mail as though it was not there. This will go through the mail as well. I wouldn't think you'd have much luck with, of course you don't try to penetrate the plate of plate armour, but this would be good for getting through leather between the joints. But what I think, or mail, what I think is, if you found yourself impacting plate while you're going about that, then you've got a far higher chance of actually bending this than you have the Rhinelander sword. So it really depends on what you want it for. Let's see, let's go to my arbitrary scale, and when it comes to speed, I would say that 5s are going to be saved for rapiers. So I will give the Bosworth sword. You see here I'm creating a precedent for what I'll be doing in the future. I think I would give the Bosworth sword a 3. The Rhinelander, that's the wrong place, a 2. And for strength, I would say the Rhinelander gets a 4, and the Bosworth, I think it's thin enough. I'm going to give that a 2. That really isn't something particularly technical or scientific. It's really just my opinion. But it might be of some interest when I've got a lot of these sword statistic cards and can make some comparisons. That's it then. I hope this has been of some interest to people who are thinking of buying these. I think they're both good weapons. If you want the Rhinelander bastard sword, hurry. It was on sale in a few places. I got it for about 300. Now I see it for 370. And it's out of stock in most places, and some websites say it's discontinued, so hurry. I think it's worth having. For about £300, you'll do a lot better to buy this than to do what I did and spend a little bit more than 300 on a cold steel weapon, and they are most certainly inferior to this. And if anything, I might say that the Bosworth sword, is a slightly more desirable weapon for a collector. It's well made. I have some cheaper things by Windlass. This seems to be of better quality, and I think you would like having it in your collection. Came with some kind of a certificate talking about individual swordsmiths' attention to it. I can't verify that, but it's not just something churned out on a massive scale. I think they have paid attention to detail and taken care over producing it. Right then, now to little bits of cutting at the bottom of the garden. Here goes. As I've said before, I'm not sure if this really does anything to indicate battle worthiness of a sword, of a modern blade. I like doing it. The most I've ever had is actually with this Bosworth sword, with 8 cuts successfully. Previously, the other person, my brother-in-law, had 7 as the most, and another friend of mine had 6. Right, let's see. Start off with using both blades. I'll do a couple of bottles where I try to stay in an ideal position, get as many as I can. And when you're doing this, it's not really how you would plan to handle a sword in combat. That was pretty smooth. 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, if I was to turn that round so I've got a larger edge, I'd think it's cheating. I think this says, just testing that audio, that this cuts pretty well, and this is after I had to remove a bit of rust from the blade and potentially blunted it. I'm sure I blunted it a little. No. Okay, so that's 5 successful, which is not bad. Now to the Bosworth sword. Sorry, the Rhinelander bastard sword. Completely wrong. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, 5 cuts, 5 successful cuts. Okay, same sort of situation. I don't expect this to cut quite as well. Let's make sure that's central. It's important to not have anything that hinders the movement of the bottle, otherwise you're cheating. See, this is partly just because of the heavier blade. Even if it wasn't a little thicker here, and I believe it is at this point, although there's more of a taper overall, the fact that it's got more mass, that it's wider, means that there's more chance for it to come into contact with the bottle and create friction, therefore moving the bottle rather than just slicing through it cleanly. I might see if I can draw a little bit with this as well. It doesn't go through as smoothly, which is to be expected. Still pretty bloody sharp. That's not bad. 3. When you put one of these bottles on and do very badly, you get 2 or 3 at the most. I think I might just make a 4th, nice and level. Yes, not that bad, but it's definitely going to come off this time. It's not, it means I'm not comparing them accurately, but let's try it. Let's try one the other way. Oh, and it went everywhere, including all over the lens. No damage done. Okay. This time I'm going to try, I think, backhand first. I'll put it around this way because I don't want to wet the camera. So far it looks like the Bosworth sword is a better cutter, which is to be expected. But then if we were assessing something where impact matters, then this could win purely because of its greater weight. Clearly I need to be better at doing this. That was pretty smooth, which I think is testament to the blade. and not me. Well, that took a piece off. Just going to try to cut the edge. Oh well, again, it's the blade and not me that's to be complimented. I'm going to try something a little bit more combat realistic. See if I can just do a circle cut at a bit of an angle, probably followed by one. So let's see, something like that, or perhaps overhead and then circle. Let's try that, but at an angle. Otherwise, there's no point just cutting the bottle in two. Not quite sure that I did what I said there. I'm somewhat thrown off by the threat of soaking the camera again. Right, so somewhat overhead and then circle. Both at an angle, not supposed to go straight down. I'd have liked to have one more try. Okay, just for my own pleasure, I'm just going to try forward, back, forward, back. I feel inclined when using a longsword to go that way and to turn to come back the other way. You do have reverse edge cuts and forward edge cuts when you see people training in longsword. I need to become more familiar with that. I'm going to try to make it reverse edge. Right, well, it took the top off. I'm going to have a harder time staying straight. I think I have to adjust my wrist angle. Oh no. Okay, that's it for now. So here's the Bosworth Longsword, the Rhinelander bastard sword. They're both good weapons. I have cold steel longsword, isn't very good. I have Red Dragon Armories, Temple Church sword, very large. I like that. But overall, if I had to choose two weapons I have, if I had to cut my collection down to two large hilted weapons, I'll choose these and probably let the others go. Right, thanks for watching. As I said in my recent video about the double end bag, I hadn't made videos for a long time, had several false starts with this. It's something I like to get the hang of doing. I'm not very good at speaking in front of a camera, but I'm a lot better than I was to begin with. I hope these videos will be of use to people in years to come, even if they don't get that much of an audience. And I think in particular exercise videos have taken a real hit on exposure on YouTube. At one point, even with my very basic beginner approach, I would get 1,000 views on some videos, and now I get 50 and 60. This one hopefully will be like some of my other sword videos. Even if it's not watched much at the moment, people might find it useful in the future. I must put the weapon titles in the title of the video for that, the weapon names. And the rain's just starting to fall, so that was pretty good timing. My name's Mark, thanks for watching, see you next time. Cheers.